Anthony Spalton is a disaster risk reduction specialist for UNICEF. On a visit to UNICEF UK's offices ahead of the publication of UNICEF's forthcoming research on children and disasters, I spoke to him about children's vulnerability to climate-related disasters and why countries should put children at the centre of their climate adaptation plans. Why are children particularly vulnerable to climate-related disasters?
Well, I think children are vulnerable to all disasters. In terms of climate-related disasters, and here we're talking about flooding, we're talking about drought, we're talking about storms and cyclones. Of course, children are less physically developed, have less power and less voice, and less access to resources than adults do. And we know, as a result, 50 to 60% of people affected by disasters are in fact children.
Are certain children more vulnerable than other children?
I think, yes. I think it goes without saying that children who live in the poorest children probably, the most vulnerable children are at higher risk of disasters. And those would be the children who don't have access to education, they don't have access to other services, they may live with their families on river floodplains, beside the ocean, in unplanned urban settlements. So it's those children that we need to be better at reaching, because they're the ones that are at greater risk.
How are children affected by different levels of disasters? Is there a difference between the big mega disasters that make the news and the more regular lower impact disasters that regularly affect countries?
I think children are probably affected in a very similar way by both types of disasters. I think the challenge is that the big disasters that get the headlines, and therefore they're the ones that are more likely to bring in support to the community or to the household to help them recover from the event and possibly to reduce their risks next time round. I think we need to put need to give more recognition to the small-scale, local-level events that happen perhaps in the household or in the village, which may not be a national disaster, but to that family and that household, it's still a disaster.
Should countries put children at the centre of their adaptation plans?
Well, I think the first reason is probably a moral reason. I mean, climate change it's an intergenerational issue, and it's the children who are going to inherit probably the worst consequences of climate change. So there's a moral and almost a rights issue in terms of children being consulted and being considered in terms of climate change. There's also, I think, a very practical dimension, and that's it's children who are going to be the guardians, if you like, of this planet in the future. So the more children can engage in this issue, the earlier on, the more likely it is that they'll know how best to protect the environment and to help adapt to the impacts of climate change. The third point really is that in terms of the impact that climate change has, and also in terms of the actual mitigation of global warming, children themselves have some very valid opinions and ideas, and they bring a number of practical activities to the table that can really make a difference. So governments also benefit by listening to children and to listening to they're actually probably very practical and tangible steps.
Question: what are the long-term benefits for countries of investing in child-focused adaptation programs?
I think the key long-term benefit would be that you're investing in the next generation. You're investing in a generation of people. Children are people who will be inheriting a very difficult situation from this generation. By investing in those children and in that generation, you've got a better chance of actually facing some of those challenges.
Riley reporting for UNICEF UK.